Yes, he got it done. Very impressive. I'm very impressed with you, Sir Benjamin Stein, too. And on that note, I want to welcome everybody to the Saturday night special of the world, according to that man in the upper left corner.
I think I'm in the upper right corner on my screen.
On mine, you're on the upper left. And God, you're always into it. We want to welcome everybody to the world, according to that man, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. On this fine Saturday evening, we are, of course, joined tonight by a man that's never simple. Men want to be with him. Women want to be like him. From the simplelifenow.com founder, Gary Collins. How are you tonight, Gary?
Good. I'm glad I could be a sex object to men. That's
just
what I wanted.
It doesn't matter where you get love from, my friend, as long as you're loved, and you're loved by all, Gary.
Yes, by all.
And the response from the podcast we did was exceptional, and
good
reviews.
Which one's that one?
The one you did with Rob Kendall.
Okay.
And of course, this show wouldn't be complete without actor, writer, provocateur, saint, sinner, lover, father, grandfather, mathematician, statistician, mathematician, economist, comic, but of course, master chef, and most importantly, Dr. Benjamin Jeremy Stein.
Very, very few people are both lawyers and doctors and master chefs, but I had to do it, so I did.
And
sometimes when you have to do something, you do it.
And for the record, on YouTube, you are on the top right. Thank you, Brady. Thank you very much for that. And I want to remind everybody, please keep downloading the episodes. It means the world to us. And give them a 5-star review. Also, Ben's email, benstein.substack.com. Get Gary's podcast. Those just reminders before the show. And now let's get started on this Saturday night special. Benjamin Jeremy Stein. I was reading you the headlines coming out. Milley says what you saw unfold with Afghanistan.
Is this Milley, Vanilli, or General Milley?
It should be Milley Vanilli. That's actually brilliantly said. He's Milley. He said the evacuation was one of the plans. There was an extensive amount of planning on this, Ben. If this was one of the plans, Ben Stein, they had, I want to see the bad plans.
Well, wait a second, but I mean, the sad thing is that they had gotten into such deep doo-doo that I think this probably was one of the plans. I don't think they had any idea of just how bad things were. I think they're being lied to right and left, up and down by the people in the field. And they had no idea, I hope and pray, of just how bad things were. And so when the doo-doo hit the fan, I think this really was one of their plans. I mean, they didn't really know what else to do except screw up. I mean, they had screwed up for so long, they didn't know what else to do but keep screwing up.
So you're basically saying this is, I mean, I don't even know how to describe.
I'm basically saying is that these guys have been so incompetent for so long that they had dug themselves into a hole so deep that there was no easy or right or proper getting out of it. Although clearly, even until the last moments, if they had had more men and equipment, not to give to the Taliban, but more men and equipment with which to fight off the Taliban, they could have gotten more people out. The idea that it all came about in 7 days, that's so horrible. I can hardly catch my breath thinking about it.
Yeah, Gary Collins, you being in all, by the way, I always forget to mention the fact that you served our government for over 20 years and you served in the field for 20 years. I mean, for our country. And I don't know, Ben said it best. It's like Milley Vanilli. I mean, I think it's a guy impostoring himself. Is that a word, Ben? Impostoring?
Well, I don't think impostoring is a verb, or impostor is a verb, but I do think there was a story, I forget what it was in. Was it in the American Spectator? I think it was, but I could be wrong about that. Early in his term, President Trump gathered the top generals around and said, "You guys are a bunch of losers. You've dug us into a terribly deep hole everywhere you've been, and you keep saying we're winning and we're losing. What can we do to make ourselves start winning again?" And instead of saying, you're right, let's make some plans to start winning, they all started to hate him and spread lies about him to the media. And so we had a military joining up with the media in revolt against the chief executive.
So Gary, I think the whole thing is there's so much craziness in this story. I don't even know where you latch onto who the bigger fuck up was done by, Gary.
Well, that's a loaded question if there ever was one. I do think they had the proper information to make a proper evacuation. I believe that the incompetence of the Biden administration, this is, again, I've said, this is the same people who fucked up Benghazi. The same protocols were used. They abandoned people just like they did in Benghazi. They use the same MO over and over and over again. And I'm proud to say Rob O'Neill, who killed Osama bin Laden, Llama. He wrote a llama. And, but he agrees that the contractors left all this equipment behind and the politicians allowed this to happen because of the military industrial complex, that they knew that the contractors were going to have to get back in and they're going to have to resupply all this stuff all over again because you can't use any of it now. They left close to $100 billion worth of high-tech equipment, weapons, bombs, you name it. And guess what? Now we get to replace it again because you can't use any of it. None of it. It's all shit canned. You can't use any of it.
But that's something close to treason. I mean, you're talking about very, very, very serious mistakes here.
But Ben, you've Ben, many times you have said, though, this is treasonous.
I think so. I think we are talking about misconduct on a scale so large that it rises to the level of treason.
But you notice how quiet it's gotten, though? Have you noticed how quiet all of a sudden it got? And now that the evacuation's done and civilians and veterans are risking their lives to get people out, now it's all quiet. Because now it's a success. And when the actual people doing the dirty work, not the government, get all these people out, they're going to go, look what we did. We're the best. We got everyone out. Yeah. It's such a joke. And I agree, Ben, it is treasonous. And here's a problem with our country right now is these people who make these insanely terrible decisions that kill people and maim and change the landscape of multiple countries, not just one, multiple, nothing happens to them. No one's been disciplined. No one's been fired.
That's kind of amazing. I think that's kind of amazing. Yeah. Not one person in charge of the debacle in Afghanistan has been disciplined.
What debacle?
As far as I know, even demoted, let alone fired or prosecuted or court-martialed. I mean, that to me is astonishing that they could have an advantage in weaponry on a colossal, stupendous scale, still lose, still be humiliated, and no one's disciplined for it, no one's punished for it at all. That seems impossible.
Well, I think what Gary brings up, the point that very good point that Gary's bringing up too, is with the media, they're not covering it anymore because it's no longer a story. So who should be fired? Who needs to be fired? It's Labor Day weekend, regardless of the jobs report, the inflation report, the southern border crisis. It's Labor Day weekend, Ben Stein.
It got quiet. Here's the part that makes it better. I talked about this with someone else. I said, here's the thing. They just armed the biggest terrorist organization to the teeth in the world.
The best arms in the world.
They're now a superpower. We have just created a terrorist superpower. If you disagree with any Democrat, anyone in the media, they instantly compare you to the Taliban. Tell me that isn't fucking insanity if there ever was insanity.
Yeah, it's insanity. It's insanity. And as I say, aside from us guys on this show, I don't think anyone is talking about it. I mean, if you look at the front page.
No, can I say something?
It's gone. The story's already gone.
Ben, people are talking about certain things if you turn on Fox and you turn on, but they're not talking about it in the intricacies. They're not talking about it in its most basic, the most basic part, aiding
and abetting the enemy in time of war. Giving aid and comfort to
Mhm.
the enemy in time of war. That's what the Constitution says treason is, neither more nor less. And we were clearly giving aid and comfort to the enemy in time of war. What more it takes for there to be some kind of disciplinary action taken against these horrible people, I do not know. But it's something's got to give. I mean, we cannot have a country in which our military simply gives over its best armaments to our enemies and then leaves.
And the fourth branch of the government, Ben, has decided that those people should not, and for people that are unfamiliar with Ben's fourth branch of the government, it is the media. They have decided to bury the story, to cover up. So there is no, there are going to be no court martials. There will be no resignings. There will be none of this stuff. And it's sort of a frightening thing, because this is what we're stuck with 7 months and 15 days into this regime, Ben. And I've been saying to you, and I as you were saying to me the other night, I brought this up, that one of the things Ben Stein constantly says to me is, I won't be around for that. And I said to him, Ben, it's been 7 months and 15 days. Who the hell knows? You probably will be around for most of this crap.
Well, I probably will be, but what if I may say this, what's happened in Afghanistan is a stone disaster. But I think what's happened in the United States of America, in terms of shutting down the First Amendment, is an even worse disaster. And I think the fact that we are giving the Taliban freedom of the press and not giving the former president of the United States, who got 75 million votes in the last election, freedom of speech, that is a real serious crime against the Constitution of the United States, and nobody's doing anything about it. It's not in the newspapers at all. It doesn't exist. It never happened.
Texas I believe they did pass that law or getting ready to make the social media companies, to make them basically open, because they're acting as a media, as almost, so it's opened the doors up. And I hope that a lot of other states will follow suit. And that's the problem, right? Is we've come to a point where you have to basically live in a state that believes in what you believe in, instead of the United States. Now you have to pick a state where you can go and you can have these freedoms. And I hope they do get it passed. That was part of those Democrats leaving and going to DC, is they didn't want to pass that law either. But it looks like it's going to go through. And I hope other states take the template and run with it. Because now these companies can be sued.
Ben, here's the problem with what he just said. So people they move, they leave states, and they continue to vote in the way they did in the last state. So they go to Texas, they start turning it purple with the same lunacy that started turning us. I mean, what we're dealing with in California, Texas, if they're not careful, will be facing the same consequences.
Yeah, it's a really scary story. And by the way, I think something's wrong with the computer right now. But anyway, here we go. Here's Gary back again.
Sorry, I had to yell at my dogs.
Of course. There is a serious issue here, in that the judges and the prosecutors in the United States of America do not seem to realize that we have a constitution, and the Constitution gets enforced by prosecutors taking the guilty parties into court and bringing lawsuits or criminal prosecutions against them. Why is that not happening? How can it be that in the hundreds and hundreds of judicial districts in the United States of America, there's not one who will bring this case to court? Not one? Can that be? Not one?
Yeah, I mean, it's a frightening thing, but as you all know, they're scared to death. They're frightened. They're frightened for their safety, because they don't want to be doxxed, which is having their, information put online. They don't want to have their families assaulted, online and possibly physically in person. So there's a real fear the left has instilled, and we have real data. I mean, when you look at what the left did to Tucker Carlson's house last year, and
to Tucker himself.
And to Tucker himself. Listen, he did it himself. If he did it himself, it's scary enough. But do it to somebody's family when their wife and children are home. And that's just it's reminiscent of, nobody wants to talk about the fact that last year during riots, your wife had to, hide in the bathroom with weaponry
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
her nurse.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. And it makes me absolutely furious, and it makes me insane with rage that happened to my wife and to our wonderful nurse Gemma. Yeah, it's just absolutely insane. I mean, they were marching around our house shouting, "Eat the rich." They haven't learned yet that I'm not rich anymore, and they haven't learned apparently that we're armed to the teeth, so they better not come to the door of this particular ex-rich person's house. But it is astonishing what's going on in America, and it doesn't look to me as if it's getting any better. I mean, is it getting better? If it's getting better, I don't see it getting better.
Well, and no one's talking about this, that Congress is about ready to issue illegal subpoenas against political enemies to get their phone and text records. And they're not doing it in search of the insurrection. That's a bunch of bullshit. They're looking for a crime. They're trying to find a crime. They're trying to pin them and find them. And how Nancy Pelosi works, they may not, if they find something, they may not get, get any discipline. What she's going to do is hold it over their head for votes. That's what she does.
Ooh,
that's what she does.
ooh,
She's evil. She is truly evil.
Yeah, the whole Democratic Party at this point has evolved into the anti-Constitution party. And I hear on the radio, I mean, I guess I'm the last person in the world to listen to the radio, but I hear on the radio all the time people saying the Constitution is outmoded. It was written by slaveholders, some of them, and we should not have a Constitution like the Constitution we have anymore. We should have a new Constitution that is more equitable and involves more diversity. And this to me is just terrifying. The Constitution is the bedrock of this country. If we take it away, there is no more America. And yes, it's possible that I'll still be here. My granddaughter definitely will not. I will not be here. My granddaughter will be here. And she will never know what a great America the Democrats took away from her. There's a wonderful line by the French author, the great French author Stendhal, who says, "Hardly a man is now alive who remembers how wonderful life was before the revolution." And that is so incredibly true. Before this revolution of the leftists and the Democrats who decided that they were going to take away our Constitution, life was really great. We had freedom. It wasn't as rich a country as it is now, but we had freedom.
And on that note, sorry, Gary.
Oh, go ahead. Well, ironically, I'm doing an episode on the Constitution and the power of the Bill of Rights. Comes out on Tuesday. For this reason, exactly.
And I actually want to get into that in a few seconds because of what their next plan is about to be set in motion. Ben, somebody wanted to know if you've ever met Bob Newhart.
I don't think I ever did. There was a time when there was a restaurant just at intersection of Melrose and Robertson called Morton's, not Morton's the steakhouse, a different Morton's. And my wife and I went there very, very often, and every famous person you could think of was there. So just about every person who was famous, say from 1978 to 1995 or 2000, I would meet. But specific ones escape my mind.
And on that note, if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to That Man, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. We remind you in the chat, even if you listen to the chat here, please download the episodes. We're available wherever downloads are available. We appreciate it. I am reading your chat, obviously, since I did ask Ben if he's ever met Bob Newhart. Also, benstein.substack.com and thesimplelifenow.com for Gary Collins. I encourage everybody to download the episodes. He's amazing at his job, and his website is a brilliantly done website. We are here.
Thank you.
For the Saturday night special of The World According to Ben Stein. We'd be remiss if we don't wish our people a happy new year that's coming up, Ben Stein.
Our wonderful Jewish people. Imagine the fact that Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the favorite president of the Jews, turned away the SS St. Louis filled with Jewish immigrants leaving Germany to come to America. He turned them away to go back to Germany and be killed. Imagine that. Imagine if Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who, when approached by various extremely high-ranking Jewish people in the war in the United States of America said, look, America was built for Northern European Protestants. That's it. And but he's still the hero of the Jews.
It's but I think back on the same thing. Like, listen, we recognize that Harry Truman did recognize Israel as a state,
And that was a great thing.
But at the same time, he didn't allow them to have weapons.
He did not allow weapons. He did not allow weapons to be sold to Israel. B, he did not allow Americans to serve in that war. And by the way, Dwight Eisenhower, a wonderful, great, super great man. He was not really a great friend of Israel either. And John F. Kennedy was definitely not a great friend of Israel. And Lyndon Johnson was definitely not a great friend of Israel. Israel has had one great, unbelievable, two, right? But one unbelievable, unimaginably great friend, Richard M. Nixon.
I say two with Donald J. Trump.
But Donald Trump did not actually risk nuclear war for Israel.
Well, thank God he didn't have to.
Thank God he didn't have to.
Thank God he didn't have to. And by the way, what we're referring to with weapons, so people understand with Harry Truman, after World War II, the surplus, we had a surplus here, as opposed to the surplus we have in Afghanistan right now. And we had a major surplus of weapons, of airplanes, and Harry Truman would not allow the Israeli army to get any of them. He ordered the destroyed. And if not for Eddie, I will have to look up his name, who basically took planes piece by piece and shipped them to Venezuela, so then they could send them somewhere else to build the planes. And Ben showed me the documentaries, and it's called Above and Beyond. I highly recommend everybody get this documentary about how one airplane scared off the Egyptian army. The Israelis had one airplane, Gary Collins, and it scared off the Egyptian army.
A rebuilt Messerschmitt 109.
They flew 3,000 miles, Ben and Gary, with gasoline tanks across the ocean. With gasoline tanks in the plane. I mean, it's just an incredible story. And happy Rosh Hashanah, happy New Year to everybody. Tichatei v'techatem. May it be a beautiful New Year for everybody. Ben Stein, as I wanted to get into the next subject, which is now they're getting into the court packing thing again. And it's been known that Biden has been looking for executive action of adding judges to the court. And they're screaming somehow that we stole court seats. What we did was political, and we didn't steal any court seats, but it is a big fear. This is another constitutional issue, Ben Stein, that they are.
Well, there's nothing.
I know it's not in the Constitution. Yeah.
But the last time we had a president who tried to pack the Supreme Court was our same old friend, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who did not like the fact that the court was ruling against his work to make America a socialist country. And he's allowed to do it. He's perfectly allowed to do it. But it turned out that the mass of people in the United States of America rose up in resentment and rebellion against it, and the scheme went absolutely nowhere. Now, are the people of America willing to lift their heads up out of their video games now and do something about an attempt to court at the back of the court? I'm not sure. I sure hope so.
I don't even think they understand what the Supreme Court is, most Americans.
That's right.
And not only that, but why do they want to pack the court anyway? It's not like they decide on anything important anymore. They just
and it's not like they go against the Republicans anyway.
They did with Texas.
They did.
And the thing with Texas is what really screwed the courts up and screwed our country up in the first place. This old argument was Roe v. Wade and the Supreme Court. And it's sort of this crazy thing, Ben, when you think about it, what was that, 1974? So here,
I think 72.
72. So here we are 48 years later. And the issue,
49.
the biggest issue, well, 49 years later. Yeah. So the biggest issue that conservatives that really galvanized the Republican base, which was what, we got the Supremes in, and and they used the courts in the first place because they had the courts then to get Roe v. Wade passed through. So it's like it's sort of a fascinating thing how they've used the courts.
Well, the fascinating thing that the people who are running the Supreme Court just completely ignored the Constitution. I mean, there's nothing in the Roe v. Wade, unequivocally the most important Supreme Court case since the Civil War, unequivocally, without any question about it whatsoever. That case is based on something called penumbras and emanations from the Constitution, which guarantee women the right of privacy, and therefore they can get birth control without anybody knowing their name, and therefore if they can get that, they can get abortions without anyone knowing their name. Now, women, some women absolutely go crazy when you question that, so I don't want to pick a fight with them. God bless them. I'm sure they're doing what they think is best. But these penumbras and emanations are not in the Constitution. This is just something that was made up, and it's a very scary thing when we just make up things from the Constitution that just aren't there.
And it's also, Gary, a very scary thing. For whatever your opinions are on pro-choice or pro-life, I don't. To me, this has nothing to do with it. It has to do with you can't handle a certain thing, and you want to then start packing the courts, bring more judges in, make it 12, then make it 15, and make it.
Well, it never ends. And here's the thing with packing the courts and why it should not be allowed is that every president from here on out can do the exact same thing or depack the court. It's 9. Let's leave it at 9. It works. Done. Let's quit this bullshit. Let's quit the cheating, or my side doesn't have enough, votes, or what. I don't care anymore. I can't. It's 9. Deal with it. You have to have a split in the court. You don't get to pack it because you didn't get your way and you're crying like a little baby. That's not how this country works.
Unfortunately, it is.
It is now, right?
It's a good point, Ben. It's a very good point.
And Ben, nobody likes, and they don't love to bring up that their hero, their heroess, RBG, had she not retired at a different time, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and now they're begging, what is it, Breyer to retire too, because they're scared to death that they're not going to win the next election, and they're scared to death that it'll be at that point, 10 to whatever, or that Republicans will get another court picking, because it will be a galvanizing thing if Breyer doesn't retire, because to the age he's getting. But it's so fascinating, Ben, how this court thing to them is so, it really is, it's fascinating.
It's fascinating, and I will tell you that as a lawyer who studied law, and boy, was it complicated and difficult, especially civil procedure, which I hated. You really do have to be fairly smart and fairly vigorous mentally to be able to handle it. And luckily, what people don't know is that the Supreme Court justices handle very little of it. They have these young clerks who come right out of Harvard or Yale Law School, or maybe Columbia, or maybe University of Virginia, and they do all the hard work. They do all the reading of the briefs and the submissions of every kind, and they do the tough work, and then they submit memos to their bosses and to tell the bosses how the bosses should vote. And the bosses often will do what they say, and sometimes they won't. But it is not necessary to have young people on the court. That was one of the arguments that was used in the FDR days. They needed to have young people because work was so hard, and it is very hard. But as I say, it's mostly being done by young people.
Well, with the clerks and everything, but the bigger point,
clerks are young,
right? With the bigger, right? But the bigger point being, I wasn't even going with the age thing. As you saw, RBG died during a Republican's term, and the Republicans did what they were supposed to do, filled the seat. And you're hedging your bets. If at a certain age, if you're still on the court, you're hedging your bets that you could die in office while the unfriendly is in office, and you take that risk. And
should Supreme Court justices even be allowed to have a political or represent a political view?
That's a good point. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, if it was truly to be fair, shouldn't they be their ideology should be neutral in general? They shouldn't even belong to a political party.
They always claim that it is.
Ben, let me ask you a question.
They always say that it is.
Ben, when did it get bad as far as the Supremes? When did it get really ideological?
It got really ideological a long, long time ago. I mean, the justice from my home state of Maryland, who decided a very, very important case that allowed slavery to basically exist anywhere in the United States. That was in the late 1850s, or maybe late 1840s. But anyway, that's been going on for a very long time. The Supreme Court has been highly political for a very, very, very long time. But an awful lot of the justices were Southerners, and they were pro-slavery Southerners. So for a long time, the Supreme Court was the guarantor of slavery. And then for a long, long time, the Supreme Court were from wealthy, old, crusty, aristocratic American families. So they guaranteed that the power of the capitalists would be untrammeled. So it has always been political, but it's not been left-wing political for a long time. And I don't think it is yet, except for the fact of the jelly beans issue, in which the court just did not take up what they should have, it seems to be, taken up.
They should have, for sure. Well, I think it was a can of worms, though. Because just think, I think what they did is they were, how could I put it? Best way, they were cowards. They knew if they dug into the jelly bean issue that it was going to open up a can of worms, and then the jelly beans were all going to spill out, and there was going to be a whole lot of people being indicted, convicted, and it was going to turn our election system upside down because a lot of people.
That's actually a really good point, Ben. We always like to look at the little picture, but if they were to have opened if they were to have opened up the jelly bean can of worms, who knows where that could have led to?
Yeah.
And
that's a very good point. And it could have led to a very, very big thing. On the other hand, they're sworn to uphold the Constitution. They're not sworn to avoid controversy. They're sworn to uphold the Constitution.
I think at this point, Ben Stein, it almost appears that they're sworn in to avoid controversy.
Well, I think this thing about Texas was
one time, except for John Roberts, another Bush appointee, like we brought up the other night. It's like, no matter how many decades it is, the Bushes are still screwing. And I know I know you've been friendly with him, and but God bless his soul.
Not going to say a word against him ever. Not now or ever.
You have in the past.
Not now or ever.
You have in the past. But if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to That Man, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. We're talking about court packing. We're talking about General Milley Vanilli tonight. Perfect. And that is the show title. That is
Milley Vanilli.
Milley, yeah, General Milley Vanilli.
I like it.
I think it's the perfect show title for a show like this tonight. I want to welcome everybody that's listening in the chat. They say hello, say thank you, and also, as always, remind you, please keep downloading the episodes. Also, benstein.substack.com. Of course, Gary Collins, simplelifenow.com. And also, you can find Ben Stein, spectator.org. I want to get into something that Ben and I were discussing the other day. Do we go controversial, Ben, or it's Saturday night? It's not worth it.
Whatever you want.
Gary Collins, I brought up the point, and I think a lot of it stemmed from you. I was looking at these places, and for the most part, people in Afghanistan are good, nice people. For the most part, I'm sure most of them just want to live good and healthy and long and happy lives. But what happens when there's no police? What happens when there's no justice?
No constitution, no political structure. You're under Sharia law.
Gangs in those cities take over. Most of the people aren't educated in the inner cities of Kabul and Afghanistan.
Very few.
They don't have educations, Ben Stein. And I think a lot of times we like to look at them as we were talking about geniuses, Ben Stein, but most of them, for the most part, are just thuggish gang leaders that are making life living hell. Every once in a while, you get a leader in one of these movements, but for the most part, these people in Afghanistan, we lost to a bunch of uneducated, inbred thugs.
Well, that's true in Germany too. I mean, the Sturmabteilung, the stormtroopers of the Nazi Party, were uneducated thugs too. I mean, you didn't see many Nobel Prize winners. I mean, if you look at the list of Nobel Prize winners from 1900 until 2020, you're not going to see many members of the Nazi Party, although you will see a hell of a lot of Germans, but they're not members of the Nazi Party. And they were thugs too. Power flows from the barrel of a gun, as I've said many times. And that is a quote from Mao Zedong, the greatest butcher of all time, at least that we're aware of. So power flows from the barrel of a gun in Afghanistan too. It flows from the barrel of a gun in Russia. It flows from the barrel of a gun in China. It flows from the barrel of a gun all over the Middle East. It's a very sad world. People are human. They don't want to die. They don't want their families to die. You can't blame them for that, but that is the reality, unless you have a constitution that everyone is sworn to uphold. But even then, there can be violence. I mean, we had the Civil War. The Civil War should not have happened. There should not have been a Civil War. Why? You're gonna, some smart person in the chat is going to say, because the Constitution said you cannot divide up the country. The country is indivisible. But that's not true. And in fact, the judge from Maryland, who was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, whose name I'm blanking on, I'm embarrassed to say, he wrote an opinion saying the South was allowed to secede, and Lincoln just ignored it. So people can, even with a constitution, crazy things can happen, but a constitution helps a hell of a lot. And in the inner cities of America now, we have people who simply run wild without any constitution, without any rule of law. And in cities like New York and Chicago, and even our beloved Los Angeles, which we love so very, very much, there is just a wild craziness out there in which violence rules the streets. Very scary and upsetting.
Very well said. And Gary, that was sort of the correlation that I was going for. If you compare, you look at the inner cities here to the inner cities there really is not much of a difference. The education obviously is extremely poor. I'm not sure whose decision that is. People, for the most part, the majority of the people in these communities are good, upstanding people, but you have gangs.
Why do you think that, by the way?
Why do I think what?
That the majority of them are good, upstanding people.
I think most people in most communities are good people. I think most Americans are fine people.
I think Americans are.
Yeah, and I think because I've been it because Ben, I look at those regions, and I look at when Trump was there wanting peace. The people want peace. Most of the people are living in abject poverty. They're living in, I'm not saying they're misguided or they're being educated poorly, which in fact they are. Obviously, they're being taught, and and the Arabs are taught to constantly hate the Jews. It's as wifey says, it's a disease. I agree with her completely, and I just think quite a few of them, Gary, are good people. We see the way they help the Americans out, or they wanted to help the Americans out. So many of them, because they want a better life. That's sort of what I'm going on. But Gary, the correlation in the inner cities to the inner cities there, I mean, the lack of education, the lack of parenting, the lack of a constitution, the lack of a moral compass.
Well, history proves this out time and time again. The easiest way to get what you want to control the masses is to keep them poor and stupid. It's the easiest way. And then you solve the problem by giving them free stuff. I mean, that's how you keep them in line. And for us, what makes us unique, and I've seen this throughout the world, and I've had people walk up to me and talk to me about it, what makes America great is the Bill of Rights, is that we actually have in our Constitution, basically that the whole framework to protect individual rights. No other countries have that. That's why Australia is going through what they're going through right now. Going to have a really good guest on that, by the way. And that's what differentiates us from everyone else. The core of our belief is in God and individual freedom, and that God determines individual freedom, not governments. That's a big, big difference. And I think that what you see is they know in the power struggle, keep people ignorant. If they're ignorant, they don't know they're ignorant, if that makes sense, right? You don't know what you don't know. And I think that's what you have in the inner cities. The Democrats know that that's the easiest way to control their voting population. Just get them to vote blindly.
We'll get them to vote blind, and also make sure that they know the people who have the guns rule the streets, and the police are not going to help them. So they better turn to the people who have the guns. The people who have the guns are in charge. It's a very sad situation in the inner cities of the United States of America.
And I gotta say, that was always my issue, if I had any issues with Trump, Ben Stein, that was my one big issue with Trump. I think he could have been the most transformative president in the inner cities the United States ever had. He was always in there loving before he got into politics. And I think he really could have gotten in. He did get the biggest, I think the biggest black vote ever of any Republican president in quite a while, at least. And I think he could have gotten even further, because I think there's he could have connected with that community. And it goes to what we say, we have to stop being scared as conservatives, or to get into those communities and get on the ground, Ben.
Well, to get on the ground and to explain what Americans do not know, which is that the Republicans freed the slaves. The Republicans passed the anti-lynching laws. The Republicans gave black people the right to vote. That was the Republicans. The longest filibuster in the history of the United States Congress was not that long ago. It was in the 50s or early 60s, and it was done by the Democrats to prevent bills being passed that would give black people protections to vote in their voting. That wasn't even that long ago. It was in my childhood. It wasn't that long ago. And black people think that the Republicans are their enemies. The Republicans have been their friends all along. And the Democrats have put this big fat lie over on them that the Republicans are their enemies.
And the Republicans are so weak-kneed, they won't say anything. That's the
I know.
I don't understand. The Republicans just
they're scared of their own shadow.
I believe the Democrats have gone full evil. And I know I try to stay in the middle, and people get all pissed off when I go political in my world sometimes. But I firmly believe that. I firmly believe the Democrats are evil right now, in a sense, at least a portion of them. And they've turned to the dark side. But here's what makes the Republicans just as evil, is they stand back and watch it all happen. And they don't do anything about it.
Gary, that's the fifth best point you've ever made.
Very good. When I was working with Mr. Nixon, I at a point where things were really, really bad for him, and he really had very little chance of surviving, I proposed a speech to Ray Price, who was the head of the speechwriting staff, who was my boss. And I said, among the other things that we Republicans have done are this, and the incredibly long list of things we have done for African Americans. They would not touch it with a 10-foot pole.
That's it's just amazing. And we've spoken about this with gays. We've spoken about this with blacks. The inroads that could be so easily made into these communities if you just try. If you just try, it's give it the old. What have you got to lose? As Trump said,
give it the old college try.
As Trump said to the black community, what have you got to lose? What are you so scared of? And what have you got to lose? There's nothing people want more in sometimes when they're going through stuff, to have somebody there for them, actually in the community, going to them. What can I do for you personally? Getting into those places and doing that. And I don't see that happening often enough.
I don't see it happening often at all.
Yeah.
And it could be happening. And this is yet another instance where the Republicans have just not stood up for their own accomplishments. I mean, I wouldn't expect the Republicans to march and to sing and jump up and down on Pennsylvania Avenue to praise the Democrats, but to praise themselves, they won't even do that. I mean,
that's actually a great point. Take some freaking credit for what your party's done, for what Trump did, for what certain people did,
for what Gerald Ford did, for what Richard Nixon did. I worked for an incredibly great guy named Bob Brown at the Nixon White House, who was in charge of minority affairs. And we collected data about how many schools were integrated under the Democrats and how many were integrated under the Republicans. The difference was absolutely dramatic. The Republicans integrated so many more schools. It was just absolutely dramatic. But the Republican Party as a whole would not stand up for it and push that agenda.
And on that note, if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein. I noticed people in the chat, a few people brought up John Dunham. Is it Dunham? Durham? John Durham, the Durham report. Let me tell you something. I don't care how long you think this report's going to come out. It's never coming out. Nobody's getting indicted. I don't care how many times John Solomon is on Hannity or whatever other people are on his have been on his show for 3 years, gaslighting you, telling their indictments coming. They are never coming. The only people that will be getting indicted are Trump supporters.
Wait a minute, I don't even know what this is. John Durham. It seems
No,
I had a guy in my law school class named
No, John Durham. He was appointed to Gary, what was he appointed to? I don't even remember. It's been so long at this
I remember
point.
it's been so long. What
Guys, what was Durham investigating at this point? That they were going after Trump illegally or something with the
something along
with
those
the
lines.
FISA court abuse.
There it was, yeah. I believe it was
FISA. Ben, that's how long ago he's been. That's how long ago.
But this goes to something that I've been saying over and over again. We say on this show over and over again. I don't see it on any other shows. We're just a little teeny tiny show off in the wilderness, shouting out in the wilderness, in a cabin in the wilderness, like Dolly Parton when she started singing. We are saying over and over again, America, wake up. You've got a one-party state now. That's not good for children and other living things. A one-party state is not what we want. And if you don't think that the enemy, our enemies, the Chinese and the Russians, are going to take advantage of it and ram it down our throats, you are very much mistaken.
So you know what the saddest part, Ben, the point you just brought up, and I'll get to Gary about this. The saddest part about what you just brought up is what people don't realize is having different opinions makes us grow and makes us better as humans. And dissenting opinions, different opinions, arguments. But to the left, there is no arguments. To the people in Texas right now, they're the Christian Taliban. They may all of them die.
Oh my God, that's right. I've heard that. Especially is horrible.
Yeah, they're the Christian Taliban, Ben. And
that brings up another thing which we really must mention. We've mentioned before. It's got to be mentioned again. With these hands, I'm going to mention it, and this voice. Here are the Me Too movement. They got on the back of Harvey Weinstein. They got on the back of all these various producers. They got on the back of Cuomo. I'm not a big fan of Cuomo, but they got on his back for looking at a woman up and down. They are not saying a word about the fact that Sharia law is going to become the law in Afghanistan. And it means that any woman is property and can be raped, sold as a prostitute, anything that the government or that the male feels like doing to her.
They can kill him.
They can kill him, right?
Well, Ben, it doesn't fit the narrative. And it's something we've been, the other day, China, it's reported, is getting rid of femboys from their TVs, feminine boys, not men, Ben. It's sort of like, I would guess, sort of gayish type figures or whatever it is. And again, it's Hollywood is absolutely mum or in the NBA sports world is mum on this, Gary and Ben, because it's a major form of business, and who dare goes against. And at a certain point, it's almost like, Gary, if they weren't so dangerous, the left, they'd be comical. They'd be boring if they weren't so dangerous.
And let's go back to that China issue that you just brought up, and I think Gary's going to share with us something more about, because I suspect he knows quite a lot about it. When the Nazis were running Germany before World War II broke out in 1939, Hollywood actually sent people to the German embassy and showed them movies, Hollywood movies, and said, is any of these scenes offensive to you as Nazis? If so, we'll take them out because you're a very big part of our audience. That was Hollywood, which is mostly, I assure you, a Jewish business.
Well, they're doing that in China. Yeah. They actually develop movies to specifically be marketed in China, so China is not offended. That to me is insanity. And no, I totally agree. It's my body, my choice, your body, my choice.
Yeah,
and that's how they look at it. When it involves them, it's like, hey, I get to decide. Once it involves me, then they get to decide again. And the hypocrisy and the part that I can't understand is it's not even like they listen to their own voice. You see the Me Too movement, and then you know, the pro-choice movement, which, hey, here nor there, but pro-choice is my body, my choice. Then these are the same people going, hold them down and give them the jab. They're enemies. And you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. What part am I missing here in your logic? And you try to tell them you're racist, you're Taliban. And you're like, you just go, that's their argument. And that's what I mean. Until we hold them accountable for the hypocrisy, nothing's ever going to change, because they just keep doing what they're doing. And we allow them to do it. And I've kind of come up with a phrase that I call, I don't forgive, I forget. Because I think we forgive too much in this country. And here's what I mean. When you forgive someone, you let them off the hook. I don't believe in letting people off the hook for bad choices in sense that harm other people. If you do something bad to someone else, you need to face consequences. I'm not going to forgive you for screwing me and say, it's okay, don't worry about it. You're bad. I'm good. I'm all right. No. I'll forget about it so I can move on with my life and be a successful person. But I'm not going to forgive you for it. I'm going to keep you on the hook, because you need to stay on the hook. And I think that's what we're doing today, is we're letting too many people off the hook for bad behavior.
And let's look at last summer, for gosh sakes, when the whole large parts of the cities of America were being burned down. And we just said, forget about it. Never mind, no bail. I mean,
they're
no
just expressing
bail.
themselves. They're expressing themselves.
Yeah.
They're
No
artists.
problem.
They're hate artists.
As opposed to the people on Jan 6 who are the most ruthless terrorists.
Yeah, they did not damage anything or shoot anyone. Only one of them was shot and killed, and the government will not release the details on why it happened or tell us.
Well, they came out. They had an interview with him, and I saw a portion of it. He's the same guy. This is going to blow your mind, Ben. I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was a Capitol State police officer who left his gun in the bathroom, left it there after taking a deuce, and didn't report it. Just said, I ain't saying anything. So a citizen finds the gun, turns it in, finds out it's his. He never reported it. The guy was never disciplined. And this is the same guy who shot Babbitt. Same exact guy.
You know, you can't make this. You can't make that. What's the expression? What started out as
what Karl Marx said. What starts as tragedy ends as farce.
Well, it gets worse. It gets worse. He claims to be the victim.
I've seen that.
Insulting.
No.
He shot a 5'1", 110-pound unarmed woman.
Fatally.
No,
Killed her.
I mean,
It's insane.
And again, this is another example, Ben. Imagine if she was of a different race. I mean, we don't have to imagine. We know what when people constantly say, imagine if. No, we know what would happen if something like this happened under Trump, or something like this happened. We know well and clear with Republicans, Ben Stein, and Democrats. We know the difference. And I don't believe, as Gary's saying, here's the problem. We're past the point of return. Once you call people in your own country the Taliban, once you have called us deplorables, once you've gone so far in the insult chamber of what you say to people, and jailing people, imprisoning people, with the FISA court stuff. Once you've gone this far, Ben Stein, I don't see coming back from that.
I agree.
Well, I pray you're wrong.
Well, I don't pray I'm right, but how do you deal with?
I agree.
People?
It's a terribly, terribly serious problem. We have to approach it in a loving, godly way, and it's very hard to do in these present times. Excuse me a second. It's making me sad.
You all right?
It's making me sad.
Okay, so let's make you happy in the final 5 minutes of the show tonight. Let's make Ben Stein happy. If you just tuned in, you are listening to World According to Ben Stein, and for 5 minutes, we are going to make Ben Stein
happy, joy. Give me something to drink, please. Some.
It
Neil,
happens to the
Neil.
best of us. It happens to me all the time. Gary, you have any questions
need
for
something
Ben
to
that you've
drink.
ever wondered or ever
I
been
need
curious
something
about?
to drink.
Okay.
Well, no, he answered a good question because I was curious how long this had been going on, and now that I know that the Supreme Court has been political for almost 200 years, it actually clears things up for me a lot because I didn't realize it had been going on for that long. I thought this was fairly recent.
No. The Supreme Court has been being extremely political for a long time.
That's a huge problem.
Yeah,
That's
I didn't
a
realize.
massive
By the way, I
problem.
didn't know that either.
And by the, I remembered who the Supreme Court Chief Justice was, who issued a decision saying slaves could be slaves anywhere, and that was Roger Taney from Maryland.
Wow.
Yes, Roger Taney from Maryland.
Well, he remembers it because of the fried chicken.
No.
No, that's
No.
Delaware. I know.
Delaware, yeah.
I was just doing a little name chicken.
I wish I had some of that fried chicken right now.
You know, here's the great thing, Ben. You could get that fried chicken delivered overnight.
Where?
You could have it delivered overnight from whatever establishment you're so fond of in Delaware.
How do I do that?
You call them up, and I'm sure they'll. But you know, what do you mean, Ben? They freeze dry it. They'll send it to you overnight. You'll have the fried
That's
chicken.
not the same.
It's definitely not the same, but nonetheless, it will be.
It'll be good anyway.
It,
Roger Taney from the eastern shore of the Chesapeake Bay, I believe Talbot County, which is still a very beautiful area.
The fact that any human would think it's okay to own another human is kind of hard for this little ape,
Unbelievable.
this little ape brain in my empty skull to
I know.
compute.
It's unbelievable. Any human being would think that it was all right to own another human being and to be able to rape this human being, to beat this human being to death. It's absolutely incredible. And Samuel Johnson, the greatest essayist in the English language, said, he was from England, not from America. He said, is it not amazing that the greatest criers of liberty are the drivers of slaves? And he had an awfully good point there. But still, the Constitution did allow slavery. So, I mean, it's and 800,000 people, more or less, died to free the slaves. This is something that is never, ever brought up. That the bloodiest conflict that has ever happened in the Western Hemisphere was fought by the white man to free the black man.
Well, not only that, but
that
slavery.
is no small thing. That's no small thing. I mean, that has never happened before in the history of mankind, that at least that I am aware of, that the dominant race in a country went to war and lost a very large percentage of all its men in order to free another race. That's never happened before or since.
What I think the most frightening,
but slavery is a worldwide issue. That's the thing. It's a planet Earth issue. And that's where I get pissed off on a lot of it is, sure, America, hey, slavery's wrong. I don't care where you're from. I don't give a shit what color slavery is wrong. Owning
Very
other
wrong.
people
Very
is
wrong. Very wrong. Very wrong.
And that, but the thing is, it was a worldwide issue. It wasn't just America. We were the only country that fought over it. And you're right. And it doesn't make it right. It doesn't fix that, but at least we tried to right the wrong.
There are still countries in the world where there is slavery. There's still countries in the
100%.
Middle East, Muslim countries, where there is slavery, where it's considered perfectly legitimate to own slaves.
and I think the most frightening thing is if you were to do your man on the street, you know, those interviews they do on a lot of those late night shows or shows, and you had asked people, Ben, how many white people died, or how many people died in the Civil War fighting I would venture to say anybody under the age of 40 probably would not know the correct answer.
Oh, would not even come close to the
would not even come close to knowing.
No, people have no idea. And here is another thing that the Republican Party could use. The Republican Party was created to fight and end slavery. That was its purpose. That's never brought up. It's probably the most noble reason there's ever been, anywhere to found a political party, and Republicans never bring it up.
I know what the problem is. Here's the Republicans' problem. They need to get tribal designed silk scarves, tie them around their knees and heads, and bow down in the Capitol. And I think everything will be okay.
And
That was the
You're
most
right,
insane
Gary.
thing I have ever seen.
That wasn't Gary's six. That wasn't Gary's
Oh, was
six.
that Nancy Pelosi who
Yes.
did that?
Yes.
Uh,
That I was going to say, Gary, that wasn't your sixth best point you've ever brought up, but it was.
I
one
think
of-
it was damn good.
It was damn good. And if anybody's not getting it, Ben had said one time that was the best point you brought up. So now I say that to even Ken LaCourte, who's
Well,
in Burning
hey.
Man right now.
Hey,
Oh.
every once in a while, a squirrel finds an acorn, my friend. All right.
And yeah, and Ben, you're right. Republicans do have to bring this up because they've obviously lost the school systems a long time ago. So if history isn't going to be taught correctly, you have to do it directly. I like that.
Very good.
History not taught correctly has to be taught directly. I love
All right,
that.
let me sing
There's
my
your shirt,
song
Jude. There's our shirt. All
Yeah,
right, let's print it.
That's my best point I've ever brought up. I'm kidding.
Okay, ready? I'm going to sing my song.
Okay,
now.
let me. I just wanted to end that note. I want to thank everybody that's been in the chat. I want to thank everybody that's going to be listening to this program later on as they download it. We are humbled. Thank you very much for all your support. Of course, go support Gary Collins. Gary Collins.
Please,
That's
please.
simplelifenow.com.
My dogs need dog food. They're starving.
Gary Collins, simplelifenow.com. benstein.substack.com. Of course, you could also find Ben at spectator.org. Throw a few shekels their way. Also, oftentimes on Newsmax. See you Tuesday night. Have a happy Rosh Hashanah. Chag Sameach to anybody that's celebrating. Ben Stein, please take us out.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the faithful lightning of his terrible sword. His truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. I have seen him in the campfires of 100 circling camps. They have builded him an altar in the dews and in the damps. As he died to make men holy, let us die to make men free. His truth is marching